In this gold belt video, I'm going to show how to test a rich client application in C#. I have the solution open here. There are a few different approaches for testing rich client applications. In this case, I'm going to choose kind of the hardest approach, which is to actually run the rich client application and test through the API of the Forms application. I'm using a Windows Form app, so this is the API we're using today. There's two main frameworks in Windows or in .NET for running Windows applications. The first is Windows Forms, which we have here. The other is WPF, Windows Presentation Foundation. It's a completely different API, but the approach is generally the same. What we want to do, if we look in program.cs, we want to basically run main form. That's the idea here. So let's go ahead and start off with our test project, as we typically would. Create a new project. I'll use this one as xUnit. I haven't used that one in a little bit. Call this acceptance tests and create. We're doing train shipment, so I'll say train shipment tests. Go ahead and rename that file. And this will be train shipments success. We'll just make this easy for now. Once we're done with this part of it, we'll need to figure out the database side of it and anything else we need to do for mocking out things. I'm only going to cover how to get the form actually loaded and started. With this, I'm going to need a dependency on Windows Forms app. So let's right click, say add project reference. We'll add to Windows Forms app. Now, when I do this, we're going to notice we run into a problem. The problem is that the class library or the test project is a simple class library that just runs in generic .NET. But the WinForms app actually runs in a Windows context. So it's targeting the Windows environment. So I need to fix that. Before I do that, let me go ahead and just change the namespaces so that we can synchronize these. So look at the WinForms app. I'll grab this root namespace here. And I'll copy this over. So inside my test project, let's disable nullable. We'll set the root namespace to that, set the assembly name to that with acceptance tests. All right, so we've got that set up. I'll go ahead and fix my using. There we go. All right, so now that I've got that, let's go back to, we need to set the settings so that the test project also targets the Windows operating system. So we'll right click and go to properties on WinForms app. I want to show you where this is. So we've got output Windows application. That's not what we need to change. Target framework is .NET 9. Target OS is Windows. This is what needs to happen in the test project. So let me now right click on the properties of acceptance test, go to properties. And again, you'll see target OS none. So now I'm going to change this to Windows. So this is clearly only going to work in a Windows environment. And that is a limitation in .NET. When you're creating rich client applications, it will really only target Windows. Now there is a way through extensions and frameworks that you can build applications using something like Mono. You can build a rich client application that'll target something like a Mac OS or Linux, something like that. Those are not very common. So in general, if you need to do that, that's going to be a whole different rabbit trail. So I'm going to change this to target Windows, and we'll notice that our dependencies now, the warning goes away. So we're set, we're ready to actually rock and roll with our test. So at this point, all we really need to do is call into the main form. So let me just create that. We'll say main form, and I'm going to use the actual type instead of var because I want to make it explicit what we're doing. So we'll go ahead and pull this in. This is our namespace from the other project, equals new main form, and we'll say main form.show. This should show the window for us. And then from here, what we want to do is we want to get the data, basically, get the data out of the form itself. So let's just run this and let's see what happens. Let's see if we run into any errors. There it goes. I don't know if you could tell in the video, but the window flashed up very quickly and closed. So we actually were able to run that and see what was going on. So this is actually working. We are showing the window. What we need to do now is do some interrogation. We'll look into the table and make sure that we've got the data that we want. So let's go ahead and open up the code here and let's look and see what's going on in our main form. So in the form itself, what we're looking for is the schedule grid view. So if I look here at the refresh, I want the schedule data grid view. That's what I'm looking for. So there's a few different ways that I can find this. I could open up a method or a property that exposes this publicly from the main form. I could iterate over the controls. I'm going to start by iterating over the controls. So this is always available in any Windows Forms application. If I go to controls, this will have all the controls inside this control. So each control can have other controls inside it. It's just a hierarchy relationship. So there's lots of different ways I can do this. I can iterate over them, but there's also a find method. And the find method is going to take the key or the name. So I just copied that out. That's the name of the basically the control here. So I'm going to copy that out. I'm going to look for that. And I'm going to say, yes, look in all children. That way, if it's nested inside another control, like a panel control or a table layout control or anything like that, this will look recursively, deeply to find what I'm looking for. So this will be my schedule data grid view control. Now this, I want this to actually be the exact type. So let's hover over this. This is a data grid view. So let's cast this to data grid view so that we can actually use it as a data grid view. I'll need system.windows.forms in the namespace. And then this is going to give me an array, so I'll say the 0th because there's only one of these. So here's my scheduled data grid view. And now from that, I can assert equal, let's say, one schedule grid view rows.count. I like that. So let's say there's one row in the table, and let's just see if that works now. So we'll run this. All right, flashed up, closed up. I assumed that it was one. It closed so quickly. Let's change this to 3. Let's assume there's 3 tables in the 3 rows in the table, and let's see what happens now. I would expect this to fail because there was only 1. And sure enough, it fails. It expected 3. It actually got 1. So all of this is happening very, very quickly, but it's automating through the UI and exactly what's going on. So at this point, I could figure out how to create the database, load the data in there so that there are 3 rows, and then I would get those back out on the UI. One more thing I want to show really fast, this is part of the add new functionality for this, is we want to be able to click a link. So we'll have a new link or some button. Let's say we want to interact and we want to click something. Again, there's a few different ways to do this. Probably the easiest way, one is I can call into this refresh link label click event handler. Now the problem right now is that it's private, so I'd have to open it public. Personally, I'm not a fan of that. Partly because event handlers are meant to be on the form itself, and partly because we have to figure out how to mock this event args object, which is a little weird. We're not using it, so it's not that big a deal, but it is kind of weird. One of the things that I do like to do in my Windows forms is any event handler methods will have a call out to another method. So that way my event handler method is only one line, and it just calls out to another method. So this is another approach, is I could call this method directly. And then finally, I could expose another method that says something like click this button, right? So perform this click. So a few different ways to do this. I'm going to do the last part, which is we'll do public void click refresh button. So we're just going to force that open. Now from here, I can call into this label link click. There is a way to actually get the refresh link label and click it that way. I can also just call the refresh train shipment view and do whatever I need to do. So again, lots of ways to do this. There's not really a right and wrong. Conceptually, what makes the most sense to you. But now that I have this, I can click the refresh button. So we'll say main form, click refresh button. There's my method that I just created. And this will simulate clicking the refresh button for me and do the functionality that's behind that event handler. Let's go and run this one more time, just to make sure. Oh, let's change this so that it passes again. Let's run this one more time, make sure there's no errors. And it's taking a little longer because that refresh button has to go to the database and timeout. Now, even though there's an error, we're catching that error and displaying it to the screen. So there's no error that propagates up. There's no unhandled exception. But that's basically the idea. So in Windows Forms, we simply create the form and show it. That will show it inside the test. Once that's done, we can then basically grab the controls out. There's a few different ways to do this. You can go to the controls directly, or you can expose it through a method or a property that says, okay, here's your grid view, make that public so that we can access that on the test. And then finally, if you want to be able to click or interact with something, you would just create methods where you need them so that you can interact that way.